Excuse me, can you guys hear me? Because there's no audio from Zoom. We can't hear a thing, or I can't hear a thing.
Like talking is
We're muted.
And Nancy, can you now?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Now I can, thank you.
Well, you missed all the fun parts, and now it's just going to be the not fun part for the rest of the meeting.
Sorry.
Thank you for letting us know. And that's funny.
There's two chats as well. I wonder if that's also
Oh yeah.
saying that we're muted.
Yeah, that was me
Okay.
trying to get your
Thank-
attention, but I have it now, thanks.
So just for the record, we did our roll call. We've appointed our timekeeper and minutes taker. We've approved. Let's actually do that again because we actually don't have it on video.
Okay.
Can we get another motion to approve?
Motion to approve the minutes from December 2023.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion's approved. So the December minutes are approved, and we are going to add to the agenda. We're actually just going to add to agenda item.
Actually, it's already on the
C.
agenda. 6:30 PM, Select Board,
Yep.
Conservation Commission.
Yep.
Trails Committee.
So we just have another agenda item that'll fit underneath there. Great.
Yep.
Okay.
I've got one, if there's time.
Yeah.
Later, 5 to 10 minutes about the webpage,
Oh, okay.
but that can wait.
Did you go to the Ethan Tapper conversation the other day?
No, I was, did you go?
No.
Look.
One of the relevant
Yeah.
information. Okay.
Great. Well, what I wanted to do to start with agenda item B, which was to welcome our new members. Oh, and Ian, do you have to let people in, or can people just sign in whenever? Can people just sign into the account whenever? I'm just thinking about Chase and Cecilia, or do you have to let them in?
Oh, you mean they're not able to?
No. Oh, I was curious. Okay, I think we're good.
They're not there yet.
They're not there yet.
They will be there.
Yeah, they will be there. So we have two new committee members, and this is only my second town committee that I've been a part of, but in both of those town committees, people were really nice when I started, and they were very, welcoming. And I think that I'd love for the ACSC, not that it hasn't been, but to have the same spirit of welcoming to our new members as well. So big welcome to Brad and Wright, and thank you very much for digging into this with us, and for jumping into the experience that is navigating this forest and all the different community wants and needs and visions. I thought what we could do, we all kind of know each other, but it's always nice to kind of reacquaint ourselves with each other, especially as we're now kind of working in this capacity together. So what I wanted to do is, this is fairly quick, we don't have to spend a lot of time, but I thought it would be nice if we just went around and said two things. And one thing is, it's the new year. So I like the beginning of the year as a time for kind of thinking about what I want my year to look like. And so what I was thinking we could do is just one prompt would be, in 2024, what are you looking forward to? What are you excited about in terms of the work with the community forests? So what's one thing you see in the coming year that you're like, oh, this is something that I'm really looking forward to digging into, or to learning more about, or whatever it is? And the second prompt would be, what's one thing you see as a challenge? It could be like, not just a challenge for the committee, but like, oh, this is kind of maybe like a personal challenge I see, or this is something I'm going to find difficult to navigate, or something like that. And my reason for having those two prompts is just that we're going to all work together on this. And I think it's worthwhile kind of thinking like, what are the things that are looming ahead for me, and kind of just hearing from other people, because I'm sure I'm excited to hear what other people are excited about. And I also am interested to hear what other people think are challenges, either sort of like personally or for the committee in the upcoming year. So, but just one thing you're looking forward to, and one thing you think would be a challenge. We could popcorn. Anyone who wants to go can go.
Okay. I'm really looking forward to getting that management plan concise, and I was very excited about some of the ideas that were written down here as far as how it could be possibly reorganized a bit. So I really like concise things. So I'm excited about that. And I think a challenge that I feel is just the history of the committee and the history of the town. So just kind of bringing that all forward feels like a challenge to me.
I can go. I think something that I really enjoy about this committee is that we're sort of in the conversations that we are engaging in here are kind of at the crux of some really big issues that we're not alone dealing with. It's the question of how to use the natural resources around us in ways that are rational and respectful of nature and also welcoming to people is like a critical question. So it's fun to be in the middle of that conversation and try to make sense out of it. And it's really exciting to be able to engage at different points of view. And, you know, even though I think there will be lots of opportunity for disagreement, just sort of like being curious about what people's points of view are around those disagreements is something that I'm super excited about. And that's also the challenge, of course. The challenge, I think, is time. That we have this so much to talk about. It's so complicated. All the issues each have their own like tons of research behind them. And, you know, Ian and Melissa and I have gone over lots of different background and data just to come up with a few modifications that we had suggested in our subgroup back several months ago. So, and there's just not enough time to work it all out. It's really hard to do it all. And then, you know, on top of it, just navigating the bureaucracy of democracy is a challenge. So and you know, it's the way it should be. Here we are. This is participation at its best.
Chase, we're doing 2 prompts. What you're excited about for the committee in 2024, and one thing you see as a potential challenge. It could be like for yourself or for the community in general.
I'll jump in. I'll echo, I think, what a lot of people, several people have already said, but to me, the exciting thing is, boy, to get past the management plan and actually get into, you know, the actual management of the forest and getting people in there, educating them about all the cool stuff that's there, you know, leading expeditions through there, trying to get school kids in. But, you know, then it gets to the challenge of getting that, like you said, a very complex document done within a reasonable amount of time, and with tons of information. Which in a way is what I was bringing up. We can talk about that later, but how that web page might be able to help service better if it was reorganized. And I think Sam had some thoughts on that too. So I think that would be great. Challenge, personal challenge, I think I'm going to try to keep my emotions out of this, because you've all seen sometimes I can get cranked up. I want to invite everybody to shut me up anytime you want. No hard feelings.
Okay.
My heart goes out to Amy Powers on the previous committee, who at one point said, "I just want to know what will shut you up, Brad," and which I took, and I love that quote, because we're neighbors and we've known each other a long time. Some people thought that was kind of nasty. It wasn't taken that way, and it wasn't meant that way. But anyway, feel free to you know, give me a sign, throw a stool at me, whatever you want.
Noted.
Well, I'm excited about the education part of what's in the management plan, and I am a former outdoor educator, and so I see so much potential for young people in Richmond to utilize that space for research and for learning and for growth. So I'm excited to kind of see that come into fruition. And I'm going to have a challenge that is going to come around in May, which is ticks. And I think that there's like so many great things about that place. And then I also think of some of the challenges that come up that are like real challenges and that keep people out of spaces. Maybe ticks is like just like a fill-in for a lot of things, but you know, there's it's a ticks, yeah. But you know, there are things that like are real barriers to people feeling comfortable in the woods. And so I think about that too, especially even this time of year, like being really, really cold and icy. And so how do we get folks to kind of lower that bar so people feel that sort of sense of comfort and belonging in our forest?
My view of the world is really flavored by the fact that in my lifetime, the global population has increased more than 3 times. And that's just unprecedented, I think. And at the same time, fossil fuel burning has increased more than 6 times. So twice the rate of population increase. So that really flavors my view of a lot of things now. So I view the idea of 30% conservation by 2030 as an important factor in how the town should be managing a town forest. And under a number of constraints, what we're well aware of is conservation and recreation. Daniel mentioned education, and there's forestry as well. So there are a number of priorities that it's the town's responsibility, and we've been given that responsibility to try and implement a plan that takes all of those things into account in the best possible way. So that's the overall challenge. The personal challenge I see is that I kind of see I call it a log jam. But since 2018, for nearly 6 years now, the management plans sort of needed to be revised and clarified, and it's been a really difficult process. So the challenge is that for all of us, including me, is to find ways that we can get from here to there and produce something that it's very challenging to satisfy a lot of competing interests. But that's what we've got to try and do in the most efficient and collaborative way.
Well, I'm excited about collaboration here, and collaboration for me requires thoughtful compromise. And I think if we can pull off thoughtful compromise between ourselves and everybody in the town that has an interest in the forest, we'll be very successful. So those are strengths, and we can do it. So.
I'm excited to be a part of a group of different brains that bring different viewpoints and perspectives, and it's hard. It's also something that I see myself getting impatient with sometime, but I think already I can tell, like looking back, it's one of the coolest things, a cool way to interact with people that care about the forest in different ways and have different experiences as land managers and ecologists and recreationalists. And so I feel lucky to be just learning from other people, and I feel intimidated by the number of bureaucratic steps and the fact that new ones pop up frequently when we think we're getting close. And so that pushes me. So I want to get my hands on something and walk forward. I'm excited to get in the forest.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for that. I had this idea, because we do have 2 new members, and I like celebrations, and so I was like food with celebrations. I was gonna make world peace cookies because they're the best. But then I just discovered last night my wife lent out our baking sheets to a friend, and I was like, oh my God. So I had to buy cookies, but still we have some cookies, which is always a good thing. And I also think that like probably we should just have food at every meeting to keep us going, because like sort of over dinner time, and but it also meant I got to pick up my favorite cookies. So we have both gluten-filled mint chocolate cookies,
Gluten-rich.
and then we have gluten not filled chocolate chip cookies. Though if you don't like chocolate, you're out of luck. But hopefully, so you can pass those around, keep them going for the meeting. Right. So next time maybe I'll have the baking sheet to make Wilkie's cookies, which if you haven't had are like the best salty chocolate cookies in the whole world. They're phenomenal.
That's the reason why, online people really ought to come in person and make it.
Yeah, that is.
Now.
None of you guys thought it was 7 o'clock?
It did say that. You're right.
Somewhere it said it. Yeah.
That was the email I was going off of.
Yeah.
And I was sitting at home and I saw Cecilia's email
Thank you.
saying she's late. I was like, late for 6 o'clock? What do you mean?
I'll take them along.
Oh, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
It's
of
the
course.
best patient I've ever.
There you go. There's no
Hopefully-
later, doesn't it?
Hopefully it wasn't too rough.
I'm good.
You should come up one. You shout it out.
So
Yummy.
moving into our next item as we snack on tasty cookies. We have an update from Selectboard, Richmond Conservation Commission, and Richmond Trails Committee. I can do the quick Selectboard and RCC, and then Chase, would you be able to update any, if there's any?
I had Mansfield Nordic
Okay.
last Tuesday when they met, so I missed the meeting.
So no updates there, so
No.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Yep. So just a couple of things with RCC and the Select Board. RCC, very exciting. We got posts in the ground to put up salamander signs,
Wow.
which is literally like months in the making. Speaking of bureaucratic processes to put 3 posts in the ground. So come this spring, you'll notice salamander signs up at salamander crossings on Cochrane Road and up by Gillette Pond. With more to come as we find more spots where they'll be useful. And Jeanette Malone is also leading some of the trainings, or not, she's not leading the trainings, but she's helping to facilitate other people taking the trainings for being an amphibian steward on the big nights in the spring. So if you're into running around in the dark, in the rain, please come out. It is really fun. And so you'll see those up. They're just like the ones in Huntington. You see the little like with the red aft and it folds down. So really cool thing to have up for us.
Yeah.
We also talked at the RCC meeting about ways in which the RCC can support the work that we're doing. And obviously there's sort of a financial piece to that, which we've talked about. And then there's also a working group subcommittee potential help that folks would be willing to do, so if there's tasks that we need people to help with, if there's, as we do these management plan revisions, if there's like a subcommittee that gets formed, like we could ask folks from that committee to help out with that, and they've made that offer. And yeah, just there's a lot of interest in what we're doing, but also just like willingness to help out in any way they can. Ian, did you have anything you wanted to add from the Conservation Commission?
Yeah, I was present there, and well, I had some suggestions for tasks that the Conservation Commission might like to take on. One of them was to summarize the public events that were sponsored by the Conservation Commission, the panel on trail-based recreation and impacts. And then subsequently the talk by Sue Morse. So summarize the take-home messages, because those might be important to incorporate in the management plan. So yeah, those were some specifics that I thought they could help us with. But I really hope that the Conservation Commission and the Trails Commission can help us to just steer to a good provision of the management.
Mhm. And go ahead.
Well, actually, I want to jump back really quickly to the membership of the committee at appropriate place. I mean, we actually skipped a piece of that. So at some point,
From B.
the review of the terms.
Why don't we go back to it right after we do updates? Does that sound good? Okay, good. And then as a quick select board share out. God, when did we do that? When did I speak to the select board? Was that?
I think it must have been the first meeting of this
It
month.
was yeah, it was January. Okay. So the select board had offered us some critique, criticism, feedback. So I went and spoke with members of the select board. Ian was there as well. And the meeting went great. And, you know, basically, I just wanted them to feel heard and to know that we take their feedback seriously. And it seemed kind of like water under the bridge. They knew there was a restatement of trust in this committee to be good stewards of the management plan and of the forest. And we also though got into a very interesting conversation about working groups and subcommittees and what is required. And this is something that will affect our work going forward, but we don't have clarity 100% from Josh about this. So the question was around, do you have to give notice for a subcommittee meeting and make it available to the public? So if Julian and I meet, just the two of us, and we are going to talk about one aspect of the management plan, it was uncertain whether we would have to make that publicly notify that meeting, allow the public to attend that meeting, and then to publish minutes on that meeting.
Wow.
Which is a much bigger lift when you think about the little things that we have to do and the ways that we interact as a committee.
Yeah.
And just today, there was some information sent out from, I think, Ian, did you write up that synopsis?
The minutes, well, the select board, it must have been, maybe it was their second meeting. It was a recent one because the minutes just appeared addressing this issue.
Yeah. So we don't know for certain what this all means,
Wow.
but just know that it's in the pipeline, and at some point we might get more guidance about how we work as small groups on projects within a committee.
Yeah.
So, yeah, right.
I'm new to serving on a state board, which is regulated similarly.
Mhm.
Today, we had a subcommittee meeting of less than a quarter of the board.
Mhm.
And the chair of the subcommittee said, they got advice and we did not need to follow disclosure
Oh, okay.
protocols. So that's a state board that is saying that. So we'll hear what Josh has to say.
Yeah.
So.
And there may be, we were kind of talking, and you're like, is there just a subcommittee versus like a working group?
Right.
And if a subcommittee is charged with making a decision, then that's different than a working group is just doing work on behalf of the committee to then present at a public meeting to have a decision be made on. So there is some nuance there. And luckily, a lot of the stuff we do is not done in subcommittee. It's done sort of working groups and then brought to the committee, of which there are minutes taken. So, right.
So the minutes from the select board recognize that there are some challenges here. If two people have a phone call, is that a subcommittee meeting? There are a number of complexities. And also, if subcommittee meetings were to be public, then it would require currently some accommodation of Zoom access, online access. So I thought that the minutes were not 100% clear, but steered us in the direction of, well, what should be done as a subcommittee should maintain records of minutes of a meeting. And I interpret that as something that we've already been doing in the two subcommittees that were working last summer.
Yeah.
Those subcommittees met, they wrote a document which was a continuously upgraded draft of what would ultimately become a recommendation to the committee, to this committee. But on an interim basis, every month that those subcommittees had met, they submitted an interim report, which was in the packet and which was on the agenda. So my reading is.
Oh, I think that's actually just Ian's
That's Ian's.
little cursor.
Yeah, welcome, Cecilia. And so I interpret that as a working approach that actually seems to satisfy what the
Mhm.
select board was pointing
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, I mean, if it's for transparency and public input, it seemed to me that, you know, those working groups or subcommittees are not charged with making decisions, they're charged with making recommendations,
Right.
and the decisions happen here, and so it's, I mean, to my mind, fulfilling the spirit of transparency and participation with the decisions are discussed and taken here.
Mhm.
And I mean, all that stuff should be for the good of transparency, not for slowing down the work of the committee. So
Mhm.
to the extent that we can maintain that, that would be great. And if Wright's experience at the state is any indication of, you know, the way that Robert's rules work, that'd be great. I don't remember anything in the bylaws that require us to do anything like that.
It's the open meeting laws and
Right,
Yeah.
right, okay. Well,
kicking in.
to the extent that we're able, great, and if not, well, we'll do what we gotta do, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, we'll take guidance from those who spend their lives
Yeah,
working on this stuff.
yeah.
The bit in the minutes about that seemed to end rather abruptly.
Mhm.
And I was thinking it might be good just to, and I might do this, just take a look at the video.
Yeah.
And see, and it ended with a Jeff Forward saying something, and that was it.
Mm.
And like you say, not all that clear.
Yeah.
You know, what the town attorney
Yeah.
wanted, although he seemed to go for more, call it transparency than less.
Yeah.
But like you say, it can get cumbersome, and that point about working groups is,
Mhm.
that's interesting.
Right.
Yeah, that might be really.
So more to come. Okay, we'll move on to our,
Yeah, we
go back
could,
to-
I
yeah,
think it's a real quick
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
One of our responsibilities is to keep an eye on our terms of appointment, which are typically 3 years. But actually 2 of them are coming up very soon, well, this year. One of them is Wright and the other one is Daniel. And I clarified that terms end in May. So the select board likes to make an appointment or a reappointment at a meeting in May, so that the new term can begin in June. Apparently, it's a fixed date. Terms begin in June and expire in May. So because of the extra cycle of work that of committee recommendations that are involved in our appointments, it sort of moves the dates back a little bit to allow those committees. What it amounts to is that we should be announcing vacancies. According to my reading of the cycle of meetings, we should be announcing them at the end of February, so that the deadline for people applying for vacant positions would be the end of March. And that would give the month of April for this cycle of review. So we've got another month basically before we need to publicize that there are vacancies. We should do that at the end of February.
And Ian, when you say we, do you mean Josh or Duncan does that? Because we don't actually need to do that, right? The town.
We need to coordinate with them.
We need to coordinate with Duncan, right? But he'll send them. Okay.
I'm sorry, did you say Wright? I heard you say Daniel.
It is correct. I'm serving filling out a 3-month vacancy.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, now we see you, now we know.
Because of the position filling,
That's the beauty of it.
Okay,
whoever left that position.
Because you filled a vacant position, not a
okay,
brand new.
not a turned
Yes,
over.
Yeah.
Are you gonna reapply, right?
I think so.
See how many cookies he gets over the next 3 months.
That's right. See how it goes, you know. That's funny. I didn't put that together. I learned it when I was speaking to the select board. They were the ones that told me that. So I said, oh, okay, yep, that's fine.
There's a startup cost to onboarding here.
All right.
Yeah.
So,
I need more than 3 months to get my return on that.
right. All fine.
Just to clarify the date, so April, we go for the select board review in April. And appointment in April take effect in May.
Yeah, I made some notes of when the meetings are of the Conservation Commission, the Trails Committee and the Select Board.
Oh, because I go around, yeah.
They can do that in April, in the month of April. including us, and that would lead up to our meeting in April when we could submit a recommendation to the select board to their meeting in May.
Great. Okay, on to the next agenda item. So one of the things that came up in our last meeting is we were talking about just kind of going through the steps of like looking ahead. And again, we're in January, so this is kind of a fun time to think about what do we want to accomplish in 2024. And the previous chair, not co-chair, the previous chair of the committee, Nick Neveriski, had put together, along with committee members, a really nice roadmap that sort of they saw as a way to kind of move through. This would have been for 2023. So Ian had sent that out with the in the packet. And what I was thinking we could do is we can kind of go about this two ways. And I think however folks want to do it, we can totally do it. One way we could do it is we could use this as kind of the baseline, and we could actually, let me just back up 1 second, because I wanted to actually try something new this time, which is to say what we want to get out of each agenda item before we jump into it. Because sometimes people are like, are we just talking about this? Are we making a decision? Are we coming with action steps? So I want to start with what we're trying to actually do here. And I think what we'd like to do is create a new roadmap that's either something, a variation of this, or it could be one we just kind of create on our own. And we're like, here's our list of things we think we should be able to get done in 2024. It doesn't need to be like step by step, like we do this, this, this. But if they're kind of like, here are our 5 big goals, we can fill that out later on. So I think for this agenda item, what I'd like us to walk away with is like a clear sense collectively of where we're going to go this year. So, sorry, let me then get back to what Nick and company had done, which is create this.
Sorry, Daniel, but does that require adoption or a vote or something like
No.
that? Is it- okay.
Yep, it won't. No motion needed. So then Nick and folks had created this roadmap. I think this roadmap is very informative and we could use it in as much as it's helpful. And if we think it's super helpful, we could more or less stick to it or just change dates. Or if we have other ideas we want to put in there or based on new things, we could do that as well. So I'm happy to go by either process, and maybe we'll just do some combination of the two where we kind of say, oh, I'd love to see this or that. And then we can see how we might fit it into here, or we could take things out of here that we think are valuable. So maybe to start, we could, folks have ideas of kind of big ticket items that we'd like to accomplish in 2024. I think we're probably all thinking about like the same big 4 or 5, but it's good to get those on paper. And then we can kind of come up with a more itemized sort of task list so that we can kind of work our way through that kind of strategically. So what are the like big things we'd like to accomplish?
So when I read this,
Mhm.
probably incorrectly, I was viewing Nick as saying we would work on the management plan and the trails stewardship plan simultaneously.
Mhm.
And I'm just personally sort of sequential.
Mm.
The management plan to me is the overriding document. So we focus intensively on that in the near term. And then when that's mostly accomplished, then we shift over to the next task, which is perhaps the trails stewardship plan or whatever it's called at that point. So that's my perspective. So we accomplish the management plan. That's my,
We were working on them consecutively this summer, or at the same time, rather, the 2 subcommittees were working.
Yep.
On each of those at the same time this past summer, and that work finished.
A little bit of background to the like kind of status of things that went into the creation of this document is that Caitlin had met with Jafer and walked around, and he had made statements that he said right after all the front porch forum drama where he had said, I won't vote for the management plan. And he had said, what really is important to me is, or to the select board, him speaking for the select board, is that there's a trail stewardship plan attached and some pedestrian only trails. Those were like the things that he was saying were holding him up, and he and the other select board members. And so
Based on feedback that they had gotten from emails. and
yeah,
stuff.
based on feedback that they'd gotten, right? And so this was sort of like in collaboration with the select board, we're going to go at these, and we had decided not to go at the management plan at large, but only to do very specific edits. So not to reopen the whole management plan, and just to do the trail stewardship plan and very specific edits. So there were two subcommittees. Caitlin and I were the trail stewardship plan. That was going to be an appendix to the management plan. And then the other subcommittee, and Daniel worked on edits with Amy, right? And then your subcommittee worked on another management plan section that was specific, but not general.
They were specific questions that were generated, or pieces that were generated out of this total committee meeting and from public input.
Oh yeah, the final synthesis from the,
Right.
And the questions were assigned to one or the other subcommittee. Remember?
So, yeah, we weren't just working on the management plan.
so the idea here was that the select board had seen the management plan, and their feedback was, these are the very specific changes we want to see, and then bring it to us. And so that was the basis for the timeline. We're like, okay, this doesn't need to be a whole thing. And I don't know if the select board still holds that conversation with Caitlin as the informal agreement or whatever, but that was where this came from.
Well, those two committees actually ended up having a lot of convergence, and there was a little bit of overlap in the conversations. And I think the last time we looked at those documents substantively was like back in the summertime. That might have been the last time we looked at the sort of hot topics of the things that came out of that select board committee and out of the public participation piece. So to your question, I think we should go back to those and see, what we can rescue out of that, because I think what we did there on both sides responds to a lot of the concerns that people had voiced prior to, both in the public and at the select board. And I think if we can iron those out, that'll get us a long way toward resolving some of the sticky stuff that was keeping it from being approved here in the first place, or approved, maybe not the right word, but moving to the next stage.
So you guys took Melissa Levy's final synthesis of the feedback from the public engagement meeting.
Yeah.
And that's what you were working off.
Yeah.
And the edits that you made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think it's important that you noted that input was provided by Jay Furr, but it was on behalf of the select board and public input that had been coming to the select board. I mean, it wasn't his personal opinion, it was he was expressing it.
Yeah, that's how I understood it.
Yeah, and I'm sure that would have been the case. That would have been appropriate. My personal feeling is I believe very firmly in the idea of an RFP for specifying what should be done with the management plan. And so I guess I've been working as a sort of a subcommittee of one, and putting it in the packet for our meetings, and it's in the present one.
So if you were thinking about that and thinking about where that might fit in the roadmap, is that like?
Well,
near
yeah,
the
it
top
doesn't.
for you, or where
I mean,
is that?
one of the missing pieces is the time frame, but potentially, all of these, my sense is that all of these pieces that we're calling for can be specified in an RFP. That now ultimately then there's the question is how much of that work is going to be done by a paid consultant and how much is going to be done within this committee or within subcommittees. That's what needs to be resolved. I know we discussed that at our last meeting, at the January meeting. but I'm just pushing really, really hard for using that as a framework that we can all give input to. And I've been trying to identify the sources of information that should be included. And two of them are the public input sessions. There was an online opportunity for people to give input on the trails plan, and then there was a subsequent one to give input on the management plan. And those are that's written record, so that's really important material because it's written, and furthermore, it was summarized into thematic sections by Nick in the first case and for the Alyssa Levy in the second case. So those are pieces that should be factored into the revision plan. And there are others too that I've been trying to list in there, but I guess I'm just pushing really hard for that. Should be our roadmap, our timeframe, whatever, and specify the work that needs to be done, and ultimately also hopefully the timeframe within which that work would be done.
Yeah, so I guess I was trying to,
Go ahead.
Cecilia,
Did you want to respond to that?
I guess my question to you is, I hear everything you're saying. And if we're talking about this that Nick wrote, where does what you're wanting to actualize fit in here? Like, if you look at this roadmap that Nick wrote, where does that fit for you? That's my question. Or is what you're saying your entire roadmap?
Oh,
I guess I'm trying to, I'm just trying.
I am feeling like we're talking about really different things.
I do
What-
too. I thought
So
we were talking
this
about-
was an effort to not go back and get lost in the weeds of the whole management plan. It was only dealing with the specific things that the select board wanted to see to approve the plan. And so it was saying, we know sometime off in the future, we might want to revise this, but getting a select board approved version is the goal now, so that we can move forward and actively start managing the forest. And then, we can go back to it later, but there was a specific goal of being very very precise in where we adjust the trail stewardship plan and the specific feedback synthesis, which sounds different from what you're saying. And that's a big decision to open back up, re-looking at the whole management plan.
Yeah, this is the conversation we're having is like, what do we want to do in 2024? And we have the opportunity to say, is there a need, desire on the part of ourselves or the public to do work on the management plan? Yeah, and so that's that we can put that on the list. It doesn't mean we're beholden to this list, but this is the conversation of like, we want to make sure we're all going in the same direction. But I want to get to Cecilia because she's had her hand up for a while. Go ahead, Cecilia.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to let you all, continue and work out that one. But I wanted to answer your first question, Daniel, and also I guess a response a little bit to Chase about what we're only supposed to do is one of the things I'd like to see is on the wish list for 2024 is to, as we revise the management plan and integrate the trail plan, that we also integrate the appendix that we approved a couple years ago regarding the land acknowledgement and rights for Indigenous peoples on the land, and making sure that that is reflected throughout the management plan in a thoughtful way. And I tried to do that in the last round when Amy and Daniel were editing it, and I added some sections and added some pieces, but I know things are going to change. So whether it's in the RFP or on our to-do list, I'd like to see those things incorporated appropriately throughout the management plan and maintained as the appendix at the end as well, so we can see how all the pieces fit together.
Great, thanks, Cecilia. That's great feedback. Yeah, Brett.
So what I've been wondering about is because I'm hearing two things. Is it the trail stewardship plan? Is that like going to be a separate chunk of I think somebody said appendix to the management plan.
Mhm.
It's a separate item there. Or is it gonna be integrated within, say, in the recreation section? There would be, you know, here's how we're gonna take care of these trails, or maybe under, I don't, probably recreation.
Right now, it's a separate document and it
Separate.
has been written, but has not been revised in a while.
Would it have to go through the same approval
Yes.
that the management plan, select board?
Yep.
DLT.
Yep.
So,
So
gotcha.
it's not an appendix?
What's that?
It's not an appendix to the management plan?
Yeah, it is.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
We kind of talked about both options and
Yeah,
figured either direction could potentially work. We'll see where it.
okay.
Like-
Yeah, appendix would be separate, I guess.
And
Definitely, it be attached to it.
It'd be nice to be able to hand that to, I don't know, Richmond Trails or, yeah, whoever is managing it and saying, these are the guidelines.
Gotcha.
I think there are three parts of the management plan relating to trails. And the starting, so there's three parts, but really the first two relate to how does one establish the trails that don't currently exist? And then the second one is now, once there are trails in place, there are some already there, and then there are some potentially to be added. What needs to be done to manage, to steward, the stewardship, the management stewardship of those trails. So, but the first thing that I think is the first priority is to establish the criteria for establishing new trails. And it's partly that, you know, it's things like environmental protection zones and different versions of that, depending on what's being protected. They're different names, but I lump them together as environmental protection zones. Those are sort of defined in the easement, and also the buffer around them in which certain activities shouldn't be happening. Now that we may be wanting to revise that because of new science or new input from conservation commissions, meetings, or, you know, other sources. But the basic material is already there in easement. But then the second thing is the stewardship and the management, which was addressed actually, I think, by both subcommittees last summer, which was issues of monitoring the condition of trails and monitoring the usage in terms of the number of people using trails, the potential impact of using that as a sort of proxy measurement. So those pieces are available to us, might need some further refinement, but, you know, we just need to be organizing them into an easily understandable and logical fashion. And furthermore, the thing that we've talked about is the need to establish management as being dependent on a vision for the forest. So you can't really have a management plan until you've got a vision. So the vision, to a large extent, comes from the easement, the purposes of the town forest as defined in the easement. So you have purposes, you have sort of objectives for what the town wants to do, and the easement constrains us or promote or encourages us to do. But then, having got the vision, then you have the objectives that relate back to the vision, and then you have the actions that relate back to the objectives. And when I read the existing management plan, I don't see that logical flow. So I see that as being a task that should be done. Ideally, I think it should be done by a consultant. I think that kind of work is very difficult to do by committee writing, have 7 or 9 people sitting around a table trying to resolve those issues is very time consuming and difficult. And it's a good task for either a subcommittee or an external consultant.
Just quick, the three, just so I get the 3 elements. First is work out a way that how we would establish trails, criteria, those, then how to manage. Then the third element is the vision. I mean, maybe that comes first, but those would be the 3 that you mentioned.
Oh, I think I shouldn't, maybe I've been confusing two parts to this. The first part relates to, maybe the first part relates to management and the criteria for establishing a new trail or maintaining a trail. And actually there's two parts to that because the easement specifies that there are additional
I feel like we're getting bogged down in maybe some of the details we don't need. I think let's try to stay up above at like at least 10,000 feet. I think Ian's point is a revision to the management plan that allows for some logical consistency from goal to objective, from goal to task itself, right? How we go about doing that, there's a bajillion ways to do it.
yes, thanks.
Yeah. And, I'll just speak to this briefly in that, like, this is what I do for my day job now, is that, like, I literally take management plans that are 20 years old and I update them with a new template. So this is like a thing that is actually fairly straightforward in that you take a template that's a little bit more accessible, both to us and to the public, and you literally kind of just like rewrite it, the old management plan, into this newer template. And one of the things that's always in the front is like, what's the vision? Like, what are we doing here in this forest? Is this a ATV park? First and foremost, is this a bird sanctuary first and foremost? Like we sort of define that. Yeah, and then from there, so I think there's any number of consultants who could basically do what I do, or I could do that, or one of us could do that, right? It is a thing that many people in Vermont have gone to the Rubenstein School for. I have not done that actually, but
The closed caption caught you as saying there's a Brazilian way to do this instead of a million
oh,
ways.
that's such yeah. Then I definitely think that the Brazilian way is the way we should do it. Yeah.
Because they're for the stewardship record.
Yeah. I'll just add to my wish list of things that we're gonna need to do is navigate as well the zoning administrator's requirements and the engineering site plan. And that will have to happen concurrently. And so when we come up with that's the big thing that I see is missing from here is we have a fairly big lift when it comes to just who knows how that will play out, but there's a process there that we have to kind of like engage with new boards and committees that we haven't worked for, like the DRB and the zoning administrator. And so we'll just have to figure that out. But that'll be high on the list of like, kind of gotta like move that thing forward and see what we can do. We have just a few minutes left, but I want to use this. So we kind of gotten bogged down a little bit, which is great in terms of how we would redo the management plan if we're going to redo it. But are there any other big ticket items that people are like, you know what, in 2024, I'd love to see us, do X, Y, or Z, sponsor a talk in the forest. Like I'd love to go talk to all the, like send some information to all the teachers at Richmond Elementary, how they can use the town forest for the spring or anything. I just kind of want folks, if you have big ideas, I want to make sure it gets on the list.
So what's on the list now? Can you repeat the stuff that we have?
Yeah, so the things I've heard are, Julian, starting with you, is like to go back to that public engagement feedback and the select board feedback and make sure that really gets incorporated. I just mentioned navigate the zoning administrator and engineering site plan. Ian mentioned the RFP as a way to kind of set the sort of like task lists for redoing the management plan. Heard from Chase, this trail stewardship plan and kind of revisiting that and making sure that, like we're continuing the good work that I think we've already done on that and seeing how it fits into any revision or not revision of the management plan we do.
Yeah.
And then Cecilia mentioned integrating the land acknowledgement pieces into the whole management plan.
Can I make a small amendment to my suggestion? Which is basically, it's actually more line with Chase's, which is to look at those products that we made in our subcommittees and see if we are ready to say, yes, this is what we're hoping to integrate into the old and eventually new management plan that we get into. There's a lot of responses, I think, on the part of this committee to concerns that were raised that I would love for us to be like, yes, this is, or yes to this, but not to that, or, whatever the answer is. Like, we have new proposals to adjust to the feedback that we've been getting. And I'd love to go through that.
Okay.
And adding to what Cecilia was saying, I think also the forestry plan is a kind of a distinct integral part.
Eaton's work, the forestry
Yeah, there was, I mean, there's an extensive forestry plan that Ethan put together which is I mean, is it currently an appendix or is it part of the management plan?
I think
should
there's
know
an
that.
appendix, it's a separate
Yeah.
forestry management plan.
Daniel, sorry, process question here. So, you know, what Ian's talking about, the sort of reshaping or reorganization of the plan and this template that you're mentioning.
Yeah.
That may or may not generate new information, but it might make existing information more accessible.
Yeah.
Do we, going back to Wright's point about sequence, like, do we have to wait for that to happen before we can kind of like upload the changes that we are suggesting to the substance based on what we did in the summer? Or can we approve like an old version and then get into the new version? Like what maybe, and maybe you don't have the answer right.
Yeah,
I'm not actually sure.
I think we as a committee need to decide that of whether do we try to, you know, do we want to do sort of just a revision of the management plan with integrating a trail stewardship plan and sort of give them the whole package? Or do we want to, do it a little bit piecemeal? So, yeah, I think that's our question. I mean,
Yeah. It's just a timing thing, because if we do the whole
It is a
thing, I'm
timing
just
thing.
worried that we're gonna be here a year from now with no advances, because we're still waiting on the next version of the management plan that will then go to consultation, that will then get, you know, like.
Right.
And I understand that it will be an endless cycle of feedback, because that's how management
Yep.
works. But at some point, we gotta draw a line in the sand and say, here's what we have today, and here's what we're working on now, and I'm just wondering if.
Yeah, and I guess, but part of the logic for that last line was that it was a line that we had collected public feedback on.
Yeah.
Right, and so the public feedback is based on the current version, and then the only edits we were making were adding a trail stewardship plan and edits that address the public feedback.
Yeah.
So it was not necessitating a whole nother round of public input, because the only changes were based on the previous public input.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I would say on 2024 goals, I would love to advance a plan for a multi-use trail that we could build in 2024. And so by the end of the year, we can show the public that we created some access and a thoughtfully built trail that maybe will be an evolving work. But I think it's reasonable to think we'll be revising the management plan forever.
Yeah.
And so, which maybe it should be, you know, it's,
Periodically, anyway.
and so that's always gonna be something that could take all our time.
Speaking of time, we're 2 minutes past time.
thank you.
Can I slip one thing in though? I think it's really.
Yes, you can slip one thing in.
On stewardship, I think we gotta do something on the wildlife side though. You know, stewardship is more, we're stewarding the forest, right? Not just the surface of the trails.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we gotta do something to figure out some way to benchmark the health of the wildlife community, the sensitive areas.
Yeah.
And then figure out how to gauge the impact.
And
A
those,
practical way to do it.
those are in, we had proposals for that were responded to those concerns previously. That's why I think it would be really useful for this group to look at the proposals that each working group made to that effect, because you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
That came out earlier and we had
Okay.
worked on that. So
Good.
we gotta bring the substance back and say, here's how we responded, is this
Yeah.
enough? And,
Good.
and look at
That's
that.
great. Because the field naturalist report has a
Yep.
bunch of stuff in there, Meredith Martin does.
Totally, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Red.
So coming back to Ian's comment about the need for a third party to help us, consultant. Is that shared by the committee? Is it shared by the co-chair? Do we need to focus on, is that an action item that we need to make a decision on in the near term?
It's in the agenda though.
Yeah, we're actually gonna talk about that next. in the agenda
Okay,
with the
all right,
RFP.
all right, good.
So I think that this is a really great segue into that
Okay.
discussion item about not only if we, but like in what capacity, and you know, there's a million ways we could
Yep.
slice and dice it. So, great, and I'll just add to that, because I'm co-chair, so I get to have the last say. I would add to the list is organizing our website.
Yeah.
Sorry, speaking Brad to what you were saying, you know, or organizing our website, getting our materials in a way that the public does not have to sift through a laundry basket of dirty socks to find the information that they need.
Yeah.
So putting that on my
And
wish
and
list.
Brad, you've really made a start on that. Haven't you? You've been looking critically at the website and the maps that are there and the.
Send those down to Melissa.
Sure.
I'm very hungry.
Yeah, Melissa, I can tell she's been skiing a lot.
I'll say dinner already. So. Oh,
Yeah,
thank
and a shout out in the meantime to Ian's website for that's where I go when I need to find a document. I go to Ian's website because he's got all the stuff on there, and maybe we need to put that in the chat so everybody has it. Because until we fix our website, Ian's got the laundry basket more or less sorted into different piles.
Yep.
Laundry basket, yeah.
Yeah.
Should get rid of it.
You know, these gluten-free cookies, they're not that bad.
Yeah,
No.
no.
I mean, they've got a good mouthfeel. I'm kind of into them.
No elasticity, but maybe that's not a enduring characteristic of cookies.
They really crunch in your mouth. So great. Well, this is a great segue, and we've used up a little bit of time, but I think it's time well used to segue into the RFP. And so we're already actually going to jump right into one of our main management objectives. And so the background of this is that, you know, we had discussed having, and this is also when we were down more members than we're down now. So we were sort of feeling like we've got a very thin committee and we're going to need some help. Is there a way that a third party could step in and help us with a number of things? Those things could be organizing the website. Those things could be reorganizing the management plan. That's actually something Amy and I did a ton of, is just like literally moving stuff around so that the table of contents matched with what was actually in the document. Just help us get organized. So that was kind of like the low end of things. And the high end was, could we totally rewrite the management plan and have someone else do it? It could also be someone who steps in and is like, actually, we just need to set like a really clear vision for what's going on here that is reflected in the easement. It's reflected in sort of public engagement processes, and just set that so you as a committee can like move forward with this one sort of like shining star. So we have on here kind of two items. Ian has written up kind of a draft RFP, which I think gives a lot of great sort of like beginner information about what potentially we could be looking for. And we have multiple outcomes here. One outcome is that we don't actually need an RFP. We don't need to hire someone. We can do that work internally, or we're going to choose to go a certain route. But I do think the conversation about an RFP sort of sets the stage of like, what do we need? What are we looking for? Whether or not we decide to hire someone.
Maybe at some point, invite public comment from people attending.
Oh, Don, I'm so sorry, public. Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, sorry, that was my fault. Public, if anyone from the public has anything they'd like to say, please just raise your hand and I will call on you. And I apologize for not leaving time at the last agenda item for public comment.
Is that Bob Lowe?
Yeah, Bob Lowe's here. So the objective of this would be to gather comments and have a discussion about the RFP, or kind of like that roadmap for whatever we might do with the management plan. And then the other objective would be to create some working groups and assign tasks based on moving the management plan or the RFP, you know, altogether forward. So if, you know, Brad's already started to work on the website, that's a great, you know, sort of working group of one assignment.
Doesn't.
So I'd like to open it up to the group. You know, I think this is like good 30,000 foot view of time to talk about the 30,000 foot view of like, do we want to redo the management plan or not? Kind of going back to Wright's question.
When you say redo, do you mean start from scratch?
No, not at all. Reorganize. Yeah, it's not about necessarily change. It's not about changing content. It's about putting existing content in a form that's more accessible and probably more in line with what you see in other forest or other town forest management plans.
Daniel, could you talk just for 30 seconds about that template that you had in mind, that's sort of the state of the art at the moment? Like, does that sort of line up with what Ian was talking about, the vision, objectives, activities, monitoring, that kind of stuff, or like, how does it?
Yeah, it's probably not state of the art, but what the template I use sort of starts with a here's everyone that was involved in writing this management plan. Here's the partnership involved. Here's the vision for this piece of property. And that comes from the easement, comes from public engagement events. It's sort of like you take all the things and you incorporate it into this one paragraph, basically vision. So everyone's like, I know where we're going. Then there's a long piece of that, which is all the background information, right? The cultural history, the natural history. It's got big pieces about any wildlife monitoring that we've done that goes in there. Just like here's all the background info that you'd want on the forest. And then it lays out management goals. And so it says like, we've got these 5 goals. And remember, these are iterative. So those goals change over time. So it's really good. You can be like, oh, our goal for the next 5 years is to like build trails. And so that's one of the goals. And then from each of those goals, you just have different tasks. Then you basically come up with a task list. And the ones I use actually has a table. And so like if you had like the task of building trails underneath it, you'd be like, okay, talk to town zoning administrator about engineering site plan, blah, blah, blah. We'll go through all of that. So it's really an action-oriented plan where we should literally be able to like check a box and be like, next step, check a box, next step.
Okay.
And then there's lots of other stuff that can go in there, appendices, or there's always land acknowledgements, things like that.
Yeah.
But the template is more action-oriented, less about like, we wish we could have this. Wouldn't it be great to have that? Be so, so cool to do this, but it's more like kind of drilling down a little bit more.
Yeah. So what would we get from this kind of revision that we don't have now? And maybe you already answered that in the first question, but like what benefit would we derive from going through this process?
Yep.
For this?
That's the great question. I think for me, and there might be different for others. For me, there's 2 things. One is I think the public would better understand how this committee is viewing and stewarding the forest. I think it being in a more accessible form, that when members of the public are like, wait, what about this? What about that? That we could actually say like, go to the management plan, here you'll see, and it would be an easier thing for folks to actually read through.
Okay.
And I think for me, at least, as a committee member, that sort of like step-by-step layout helps me mark progress and know where we're going. So it would provide a more robust roadmap for actually accomplishing things.
Okay.
And that's what I really like about it. So I see it as, benefiting the public and benefiting us. But I'm also actually totally open to not doing that and not going through the whole process. But with my work hat on, I really appreciate having a pretty step-by-step process. Yes, Cecilia, I see you have your hand up.
Unmute. Yeah. So I just wanted to be supportive of that. I mean, I think you're right. I think it could be fairly easy task to get what we have. I think that's what Hannah was aiming for into that kind of format. There were like just 2 things I thought might be missing that's also our responsibility. And that one is all the policies. So it's not just a management plan isn't just a to-do list, but it's the policies by which we think have to be in place in order to achieve those overall goals. So I'm sure that's in there in your template as well. And then I guess, when you said it immediately went from vision to what are these 5 goals, it sounded like an annual five-year, checkup kind of list, as opposed to these are the sort of guiding principles. These are our desired future conditions. These are the policy, the policies, the use things that would help get us there. And those policies and rules or whatever might be broken down by topic, by trails or by something else. Anyway, I just wanted to add that. So one, support for that idea. I realize it could take some time, but it seems like we're at a point where the town is offering us resources to do it. I think it would behoove us for the long term, for all the reasons Daniel said. And I think if we can get something that's a clearer document for us going forward.
Okay.
Thanks, Cecilia.
I have a question. Like if we prioritize going through this process with a consultant, what percentage, best guess, I guess, of our committee's time do you think will be spent approving, reviewing? And will that trigger subsequent public input? And like, how does that look in terms of how we actually spend our time in the next year?
If I could answer that, what I'm proposing, and it's towards the end of this draft, I think, is that there's a two-stage process. Because I don't think a consultant is going to want us breathing down their neck the whole time, making helpful suggestions. So you've got to have a clear enough plan that consultant can pick it up and run with it. Bring it, but it's a two-stage thing, bring it back, pass it around, public comment, committee comment, back to the consultant with that input, and then they do what we would then hope would be a final thing. So it's a two-phase process. But but if what's given to the consultant is hopefully really specific tasks and clear brief, that we can't be watching that person the whole time. You know, they're going to be able to be free to run with it. Actually, if I could jump in with a comment going back to what Daniel was saying about reorganizing, what I interpreted as reorganizing existing materials. So taking the management plan materials and not adding anything, not deleting anything, but moving it around. I think that's what Daniel was pointing to. And I think Sam was making that point at our last meeting, that maybe a good place to start is take the management plan and just reorganize the existing content.
Which wouldn't trigger any more public review, and the select board would not say, this is different than what we talked about before.
Because if we identify,
So,
well, yeah, the content.
You don't get out of public review that easily, Chase. For one thing, anything that we're going to talk about at our meeting is open for public review.
well, I guess I'm just thinking of realistically, what do we want to prioritize for the next year? And if the majority wants it to be management plan work, then let that be our decision. But we had a goal to get to a stasis with the management plan and get something that the select board was preliminarily wanting to approve.
Yeah.
And then we could work from there, but have something that was a completed stage. And we're talking about abandoning that, I think, because we haven't gone over what that work was.
Right.
Yeah, and we're talking about doing more changes, so.
Yeah. I wonder, so I hear what you're saying, Ian and Daniel and Cecilia, about having a clearer, more straightforward, linear, action-oriented, well-organized document that you could refer back to more easily than the current, how many pages? 8,000 or so?
No, 40.
Yeah, no.
No, that's because of all the appendices.
Yeah,
but
right.
40.
40 is the basic one.
Yeah.
That was not actually too bad, but anyway, my concern about externalizing or handing off the reorganization now is that I don't think that we have solved the hotspots yet in the current management plan. So my fear about handing this off too early until we have smoothed over some of those hotspots is that person, that poor individual, is going to get stuck in the middle of a thicket that they're not going to get good direction from us about until we ourselves have managed to figure out what direction we want to give them on the hotspots. So I just, if it's only about reorganization, that's fine. If it is about trying to find another way to solve the hotspots that have not been entirely resolved yet, I don't think that's going to be a good use of funds and time. And I would not envy that poor individual who would have to be writing that and doing that on their own. I do think that some of the hotspots that we have heard of have begun to be addressed in the work that we did over the summertime. And I think before handing off any work to an external person, we should make sure that that perception is shared. It is currently my perception. I would like to know if in a meeting, if we go over that stuff, if it's a shared perception. And then I would feel much better about handing off an organizational project to someone that doesn't they're gonna blow up if they have to try to solve the things that we have not entirely solved ourselves yet after all this time. So that's my one concern in terms of sequencing. What do you think?
And I agree with you, and I viewed it a little differently. I felt like, okay, that person can just pull out all the organization things, and we can work on the hotspots.
Yeah.
While they're doing that, and
Sure.
then,
Yeah.
you know, maybe they'd be holding our feet to the fire a little bit too, and saying, yeah, what about this hotspot here? What, have you resolved that yet? You know,
Yeah.
I'm ready to put that in.
Yeah.
Here, so I saw it a little bit differently. I thought maybe they can go ahead and get started if we engage them. And then we like dive into those hotspots that we worked on this summer, and that person hopefully comes back to us and says, hey, have you finished hotspot A? Have you
Yeah.
finished your decision on hotspot B?
That makes sense. That
Yeah,
makes
that's a
lot
good
of sense to me.
perspective. I like that.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with Julian and Melissa on that. Having, been in the position of a hired gun writer for, I don't know, 40 years maybe, something like that. I would blanch it getting handed the whole content tax. And I bid it at $50,000 for something crazy, just to cover my butt, you know what I mean? I mean,
That time, yeah,
you're a consultant, I mean,
I am.
you wanna, be fair to the client, but man, I have to dig through this and come back here. And
Probably go to.
then we
public
start
meeting.
slugging it out over the hotspots, and we can address those ourselves. And they probably, maybe they're not all that hot.
Yeah, well, I'm just curious if we could identify what we think the hotspots
Yeah.
are.
So,
And, there's, so I also want to, I don't want this to be, how do I want to say this? This is not there's two roads kind of situation. There are 2 million roads we could go down.
Yeah.
So I don't want us to think we're either doing it all or nothing. We have a million different options ahead of us. One option could be we could even have like a little side document that's for our own use that has like a clear vision and blah, 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 that like this committee has agreed on, that we're not about to like change the management plan, but we as a committee think it reflects the management plan. Like we can do stuff like that address, I guess. What I'm saying is we can address the hotspots within our committee without having to change the management plan as one potential road that we could go down. Many roads. But I'm just curious, and Nancy, I see your hand up and I'll get to you just in a sec. I'm just curious if folks, like if we could identify those, or if people have a sense of like where those are popping up.
I mean, I think a lot of them are in the work that we did over the summer that we should bring back, because they are the questions about when can you access what parts of the park and under what conditions. And I think a lot of that, I think the hottest part of this conversation is the trade-offs that and the balance that we are hoping to strike between keeping this beautiful forest as intact as possible and as much of a vibrant habitat for existing wildlife as possible, and at the same time finding ways to get people to enjoy it responsibly, safely, and with in absolute harmony, or as much as is able to have harmony when people are around, which people have impact, that's true. And so, those trade-offs are the ones that have gotten us, I think, really hot over the years and have manifested in the public conversations that we've had about it.
Cool.
So I think that balance in particular, which basically is the question of where do you put a trail, how do you put a trail, and when is that trail accessible for people to get on? I think that is the primary hotspot. And the flip side of that conversation, which Ian is always bringing up, and to his credit, I really appreciate it, is like, how do we care for the animals that are in this place and minimize any impact that we're going to have on them? I think those two things are the ones that is like the hot spot. And then you get it, that you take that sort of philosophical question and put it on a map, and then I think you can have both positive progress and also get stuck as you're looking at the map. I mean, it can go either way as you get into the detail. So you go from the 10,000 feet into the weeds, and I think in my experience, you have to sort of be like an accordion, like when you get stuck at 200 feet high, you got to go back up to 10,000. When you get stuck at 10,000, you go back into the detail, and you figure out where the path is, where the path of least resistance and the greatest what'd you call it, right? Reasonable compromise, or what'd you say, responsible compromise? What was that phrase that you said?
I can't remember, but
Yeah, something along those lines. Anyway, so yeah, that's what I think is the hottest.
And we have as our next agenda item to review the trail stewardship plan, which is what you're speaking to.
It's that one,
piece
the
of
other,
it.
the other one was the CMP, the Comprehensive Management Plan,
Yeah.
which was a funny name that was given to a bunch of points that were brought up at the public engagement process or the select board. So,
Yeah, it was a funny name.
yeah.
Yeah. And we also have the updated map and trail plan.
Yeah.
That I think has not been sort of shared widely, and so we can talk about that as our last agenda item.
There's one in the packet.
Exactly.
That's actually with info that I got in the last week or so. I've improved it and I can pull up the improved version.
Okay, fair. I want to get to Nancy's comment because Nancy's had her hand up for a little bit. Go ahead, Nancy.
Oh, thanks. Actually, I put my hand up right before Daniel spoke because you sort of took the words out of my mouth. I was just going to suggest, and you've all talked about this for a few minutes now, so I won't belabor it, but that you identify as one of your goals for 2024, the committee identify a list of hotspots. Period. Julian talked about some of them subsequently, but that just seems real logical to me, and to be really honest and open about it, and say and talk about some of the things that I think people have been, I don't know, out of kindness, out of not wanting to ruffle feathers or whatever. I understand that, but some things that people need to come to grips with. They are things, as Julian's already mentioned, about trail locations, natural resource protection, and also even more specifically, how does mountain biking and the explosion of mountain biking and the popularity of it putting pressure on this piece of property, and how is this committee going to deal with that? People haven't talked about that because for some reason we can't seem to talk about mountain biking, but it's a realistic problem. It's not unique to the Andrews Forest. Obviously, it's going on across the entire country, across the world. So I guess I'm just saying, from the public's point of view, I think it's a great idea to have a list of hotspots. And I think mountain biking and some of the special considerations around mountain biking, because it is mechanized, because you can go further and faster and into the environment, and this is a certain property that has a certain connection to other parts. You know, how do those are some of those hard things that, again, I think I don't know who it was, Daniel or Julian said something that the consultant isn't going to solve for you. Cecilia said it. You know, you guys are going to have to work that out. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy.
Yep.
Go ahead, Cecilia. I see your hands up. Oh, and you're muted.
Mute, yes. So yeah, I just wanted to refer to two things. One is that comprehensive management plan. That's a funny name. I can blame that on me. It was trying to distinguish our overall forest management plan, which covers a lot of things, from the one that Ethan Tapper wrote, which he would also call a forest management plan for the Andrews Community Forest, but we've been trying to call it the forestry management plan because it's very specific. So just when we get to that, that's where that came from. And it was not meant to be yet another document that was just referring to our regular management plan, trying to come up with a name that was inclusive and different than the forestry one. And in addition, I've always been of the idea that the trail plan and the trail stewardship plan, the trail maps and the stewardship plan would ultimately be integrated into the management plan. I never thought of that as being, it's super separate or to be separate forever. But, you know, if we integrate it with Staples in terms of making an appendix, that's fine too. And I had one more thing to add to the wish list. Can't remember now.
Well, I have.
Oh yeah, I remember. It might, and it sort of came up while Nancy was talking. There's some people elsewhere in the state talking about trying to have some town forest symposium meeting group, something like that. But I'm just wondering if we want to do this year or next year, invite some people from neighboring town forest committees just to have a little conversation. whether it's at a public meeting or some other way, just to see how they're handling some of the problems we're grappling with. It might be fun,
Mhm.
maybe in the summer.
Great, thank you, Cecilia. I also just this what Nancy was saying and what Brad you were saying kind of got me thinking that we do have we had a committee to work on the trail stewardship plan, and we're talking about organizing the management plan. We don't have a subcommittee right now that's a working group, whatever we want to call it, that's working on sort of what Brad you were talking about, like a wildlife. I don't quite know how to say it, but it's sort of like a subgroup that takes the perspective of not just how do trails impact wildlife, but it's more sort of like, well, what's there and how are we stewards of the other things that live there? And I want to say that sort of carefully is not like in opposition to humans, but it's like, we don't have a subcommittee that's also looking at that other aspect of the forest, because we might do things like they might decide, hey, we should really talk to Ethan Tapper, make more brush piles for wildlife habitat, because that's a really easy and effective way to like benefit wildlife. There's many things that can be done. So that does make me I just want to throw out the idea of we could have a subcommittee that's focused on that, and that we have a trail stewardship plan and that other committee, that could be a really nice complement as a way to have those conversations from different perspectives, where it's less on like my perspective versus yours, but it's more like, here are these two things that are clear public desires for this forest, and how do we sort of take the best bits of both and make them compromise and make them work together?
I love that.
So it's just
And you could organize that by the objectives that are currently set out in the current
Exactly.
sections of the current version of the management plan
Right.
that would probably survive the reorg, I imagine.
Yeah.
So I really like that. Hotspot list, connectivity. Brad has spilled lots of ink on connectivity, and we could talk for a long time about connectivity and what it means.
And Brad, I'm totally with you on wanting to come up with impact monitoring protocol and practice. And we weren't sure exactly where that would live, and didn't want to immediately put in something that wasn't realistic for us to, like, who was going to actually do it, and so it was something to be figured out, but I'm excited to learn what that looks like.
Yeah, and in both the Trail Stewardship Committee and the Comprehensive Management Plan Committee, we had both called for using some money to develop a management plan a monitoring plan that could then be like a twice a year survey, baseline, and then impact over time. And then we'd have to figure out what actions you would take if you had the needle moving up or down, but whatever. The point is that was a response that was in both of our committees as we were looking at that feedback.
So just to take a temperature check for folks now, because the question is like, do we submit an RFP for a third party? I'm just wondering where people are at, or if folks want to recommend some next steps, based on our conversation.
If you guys think it's realistic, I like Melissa's working in parallel idea, where 90% of this thing is not a problem. 10% is going to get a little heat that I think as adults we can probably manage.
So structures, I think easy. The organization of it should be easy, relatively easy to work on. Quite easy actually. And that, when you say parallel, and then meanwhile we work on content, especially the hotspot.
The hotspot,
Yeah, and then it's a plug-in.
Yeah.
Kind of where I plug this into this part of the structure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only question is whether or not we think we can resolve those hotspots in a timely enough manner for that consultant to not be driven crazy.
Yeah.
And how long have we been talking about these hotspots?
Oh, we haven't been talking about
Not
that a
before,
lot.
not
Well,
before.
we,
Yeah.
the committee, pre a lot of us. The can just keeps getting kicked down the road. And I think we just have to confront it.
Yeah.
The phrase way back 2 years ago was the elephant in the room.
Yeah. Yeah.
And same as the hotspot.
So let's, an hour next month. Focus on hotspots, and that's gonna bring me up to speed on a bunch of these. Yeah,
I would say if it's not an hour, right? I think it's probably the next 2 meetings.
fine. An hour the next 2 meetings.
No, I mean, the next 2 meetings.
Okay, 4 hours then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah.
And you can catch up on a lot of them if you look at the summer work that's on is it in your website or on the town website? All the minutes from the CMP subcommittee meetings that had a lot of the hotspots.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think it's a great idea.
Great. And I don't totally agree that we haven't talked about everything. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we haven't had the time to give every topic the depth. And we haven't had time to like bring out the data and look at solutions and stuff, but I feel like the dialogue and the interest in dialogue has been there. Well, I don't think we're dodging anything. We just have a lot.
Well, we had a lot of procedural and leadership
Turmoil.
Yeah.
turmoil that
Yeah.
kind of put a wrench in the substantive discussion.
But I think the hotspots are a big part of the reason we're all here is
Yeah.
because they're like, oh, these are all people that have perspectives.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I agree. I'll take back some of that, but I oversimplified it, but I think Nancy
we
had
haven't
it.
talked about it since August, you know?
Well, it's true. For other reasons,
Yeah.
but when the subject has come around, I think some of what Nancy was saying is true, just a reluctance to really, face up to, some of the hard things and try to resolve them.
Yeah.
But we can do that.
Yeah.
We can do that.
I see it as like different viewpoints, not a reluctance to face up, but if someone's asking someone to face their truth.
Yeah. But we
And
never,
there's, yeah, I mean, it takes work to find the common language.
yeah.
But just because someone hasn't adopted someone else's perspective
Oh,
No.
doesn't mean that they're.
right.
A couple of things. There's a comment from Cecilia on the chat. And I'd like to take a quick look at this item on the agenda and see if we
Veggie
can,
management plan.
in the last few minutes, get to a closure using the agenda.
Yeah. Oh, but yes. So let's do that. Melissa, did you have
I did. I wanted to just add one closing comment to this hitting the hotspots discussion. And we do a lot of work on those hotspots. Another concurrent thing I'm thinking about is the zoning, because we could do all this work and really tangle and get down to the brass tacks on what we decide is our final connectivity. And then we go to the zoning and he says, oh, no, that can't go there. Or it can't be here, that's too steep, or, his input. I'd hate to see us work through all these really difficult hotspot things and then have him say, oh, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to change that. So I don't know how to bring him into the conversation or have a subcommittee working concurrently in that area.
I agree, and I think we need to have exactly what you said. I think we need to have a subcommittee that's working in parallel, and that's just keeping the process moving. And as we learn more from the zoning end of things, we inform and I'd actually be happy to do that.
I would too.
Okay.
You know,
So if other folks are interested in doing that on a subcommittee, let me know. And I brought up the idea of a more sort of like wildlife focused subcommittee. And if folks are interested in doing that, if that that could be a really cool thing. We don't necessarily have to like put a big agenda item, like a task list associated with that, but even the fact of establishing it moves us closer to kind of like leaning into that part of our work.
I don't know if you guys interpreted the communication from Tyler the same way, but I interpreted him as saying, you're gonna need to take the work that was done thus far to the DRB and ask them what they really want in terms of a site plan.
Yeah.
Because he had his recommendation, his line is that I'm just following the rules, but the DRB is actually gonna tell you.
That's what we'll have to do.
And the DRB may say what the Airwood plan satisfies as a site plan.
Yeah.
Or they may not, they may say not at all, but they get to make that call, not Tyler.
Yeah.
So it might be,
The tricky part is, in the zoning regs, it says an engineer. And when with the DRB, an engineer is a licensed engineer. And that's typically not what occurs on trail development.
Mhm.
You have a professional who's trained, or not trained, but you have oftentimes trained professionals who are not engineers.
Mhm.
And we kind of need to bridge that conversation.
So, yeah, in the interest of time, let's move on to our last item. Is that,
Yeah, the agenda here, on the current topic has three parts, and the third one is volunteer for working groups. Potential working groups are RFP writing, ACFC resources, which means website and associated maps and documents management plan template. So I guess that's calling for 2 working groups. And I think from what I've heard, there might be a third one called hotspot, so but that may that may conflict with, we dedicate a lot of time to it next meeting, but should we make some kind of closure here that we're going to identify 1 or 2 subcommittees and call for volunteers to join those? I like definitely one. Well, I'd like both. Actually, I think both have been raised as important things to make progress on. And if we can make progress with a subcommittee working over the next month, firstly on the RFP, secondly on the materials available to the public through the website and other means.
In the HCFC, the resources would be what, to organize what, I was missing that point.
like the website and our documentation, basically,
The laundry basket.
the laundry
Dirty
basket.
socks.
so we proposed 4 different subcommittees now.
Yes, there's 4.
What are they? There's the rules committee, DRB.
These don't have to be subcommittees. This
Yeah,
can just
yeah.
be like, these are
Right,
tasks.
right.
Let's just say tasks.
Good.
Yeah.
One task is to continue to at least develop an RFP, just as an idea of where we could go with that.
Yep.
Another task is to work on organizing our documents, the laundry basket of things that we have. Third task, which I've and Wright and maybe Melissa have said yes to, is moving forward the zoning administrator and DRB review process. And we also talked about sort of a wildlife, I don't want to say it's like a stewardship plan, but it could be a subcommittee to kind of think about what would be the sort of balancing subcommittee to a trail stewardship plan. You might have like a wildlife stewardship plan, and those 2 things could work well together.
Or they could be 2 parts of stewardship.
Right, exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
I would be interested in that.
Okay,
Yeah, I would too.
Brad?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I help on the RFP. Too, I think.
Melissa, did you want to help with the zoning, or
I
you?
feel like there's already 2 of you. I mean, it's something I'm interested in, so I'll leave it up to you all.
Okay. I'm gonna put you in parentheses.
Yeah, if you want or need
Um,
another person, but,
And Brad, did you say the RFP?
Yeah, who's here now? This, Mr. Ian?
I'd like to be.
Yep,
involved.
and I can also help with that, just in terms of like my
That makes 3
background.
people, does it?
Yep, and then the last one would be,
The laundry basket.
oh, well, in the laundry basket, Brad, are you already kind of,
Well, at least as far as website goes, yeah, I took a crack at that.
I'm happy to participate a little bit on it. I spent a lot of time on Ian's website, but I can.
Make those copies.
I did, yes.
and Julian, would you help me? Or, and just think about what kind of process we'd like to have for that hotspot
So-
conversation?
Very happy to do
Great.
some hotspot process suggestions.
And that's not necessarily about us identifying, but more like what process do we want to use for that discussion?
In on that. Yep.
Thank you. Okay, I've got that
That's your
written down.
special power, right?
We'll see.
So that's 5 then, right? Really?
Yeah, that is 5.
And I don't want to suggest another committee of 1, but I mean, what I would volunteer to do would be to work with any of the ones that it makes sense in terms of helping to sort of integrate Indigenous rights and practices and species and naming and all the kinds of things that would really enrich our land acknowledgement and our land.
Yeah, and Cecilia, if you do have a chance, I mean, I think an easy way to start with that would just be like, if you had comments that you could add, so without even really changing the management plan, but if you saw some obvious spots as you poke through there of.
Well, I
just
did
even-
that, whenever we did that a while ago, I went through and you'll see them scattered throughout wherever it says there's, and I'm afraid all that'll get lost. And I wrote a whole new section on history that was before the
Yes.
colonial period. But then I also, in almost every section, particularly around, trails, education, things like that. And I'm just afraid those things will get lost. So they're in there, but I'm happy to keep on that, because they also could be expanded and improved. And there's also some very tricky issues right now, as many of you are aware of, in Vermont, about how to engage local Abenaki people. So
Yeah.
anyway, just want to make sure it's not lost as we move
Cecile,
forward.
is that on the web page now?
It's
What's-
whatever our last draft was, and that's the one that went up at that meeting that Melissa Levy facilitated for us. So my comments throughout were in that draft, as well as the appendix. So I'm hoping the appendix stays in its entirety, and then it's addressed throughout. And it can be expanded or shrunk. I mean, it's up for everybody to talk about, but
Yeah.
anyway,
And then-
that's where I have time and energy right now to volunteer moving forward.
And I think the latest version of that draft has maybe Julie and Melissa and your comments. There's an August, months after Melissa Levy's session, right? You guys did one and you've got comments on that. So if we're looking at something, it would be helpful to look at the thing that has all the previous comments. So we're not, we don't have to try to merge.
Well, we have a separate document that tries to make recommendations to the management plan based on the feedback that Chase was talking about. It's
Yeah.
not the management plan itself. But so rescuing that version that was at the Camel Hump conversation, I think is where we can get that. And I wonder if it makes sense for Cecilia to be in the RFP conversation, because the RFP would be the person who would be rescuing those comments and making sure they're in the new organization. Does that make sense, Cecilia? Or is that?
Yeah. I mean, wherever it starts to fit, a lot of work went into that draft that was reviewed. Daniel identified a lot of things that needed to be improved. And at that time, we limited it because we were trying to, stay focused and not confuse people by a complete rewrite. But there was definitely a lot of work done by Amy and Daniel, and then I did some work that we don't want to lose by going back to the 2018 document.
Yeah, we won't do that.
Yeah.
And Cecilia, you're being very modest when you say you did some work. That was a huge amount of work and it was hugely appreciated. So, I'd like.
Melissa.
I'm
Oh, sorry.
recalling from the last meeting that Samuel
Yeah.
Sam had volunteered to be on a subcommittee.
Oh, yeah.
And so I didn't know if that was referring to these subcommittees we're talking about now, or if you were thinking of a subcommittee in the future. I just wanted to bring that up forward from the last meeting.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be happy to help out if you're accepting
Sure.
public help as well. I'd be interested in both the laundry committee, just the sort of the information organization committee, as I've been sort of going through that stuff myself.
Yeah.
Trying to absorb as much as I can.
Yeah.
And then also potentially the wildlife monitoring or wildlife management, whatever we want to call that, because like I have a lot of interest in that. I mean, I've been using the town forest, but I feel like there's not a whole lot of guidance for like EPZs for like dispersed use of the forest right now and stuff. So I think that that stuff to me is like interesting and important. And,
What's an EPZ?
the environmental protective zones. So like the dry oak forest, the vernal pools, like stuff like that. That's like the rarer stuff that with some of the hot topics with some of the trails, like going through or buffer zones or, going places that they maybe shouldn't, So, so yeah, that interests me just because like I have been trying to educate myself as a member of the public and still feel largely uneducated. And so that also loops into the, you know, laundry committee, I guess, too, because like I've been trying to go through like what's available online and I'm still like, you know, not getting all the information that I'm necessarily looking for.
Yeah.
So I think there's still work to be done on multiple fronts. So
Yeah.
I'd be happy to volunteer my time on either of those
Good.
working groups if I can be.
Yeah, absolutely. I got your name down.
Cool.
Thank you. In the last couple of minutes, the one thing I did want to share out, so folks had gotten the trail stewardship plan. So I just want to also, we'll probably want to share out for next time that comprehensive management plan, just so people can be aware of like kind of the most recent documents. Ian, would you mind throwing up the most recent trail map? And I'd love for us to just spend like a couple minutes. I know we don't have a ton of time left, but if we could just look at that map, just so we're all on the same page, and maybe I'll do a quick thing up here.
Just about the subcommittees, do we need a motion to create those, or do we know what?
I know we're good. Yeah.
Yeah, we're okay.
You can share with
I got a list that I can share with you. Thanks, Brad.
for the minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
Great.
So,
Do you want me to read the proposed uses
yeah, that'd be
as
helpful.
we,
And I'll point, if there's trails that don't make sense, because Ian did a great job of adding some names, but he's like put together this map and I'm happy to help.
because that I think Jesse and Caitlin put a ton of work into this balance of uses conversation with the select board. And so it'd be good to do that with justice by just seeing what this is their kind of thought on uses.
Yeah.
Do you want me to just go through it?
Or, yeah, I mean, or I did the walk with Jesse and Caitlin, so I know.
Okay, yeah.
But so the feedback we heard from the select board was like, we need more pedestrian only trail. And we also minimizing sort of trail impact. So what we were thinking is this, so here's Urbanic Way, this is the road. And someone please correct me if I get anything wrong, but this would become, we would reduce the amount of loops in here to one single loop as opposed to a figure eight. There was
This map actually implements that recommendation from the.
Oh, yeah, okay, great.
So
Yeah, so there used to be
It used to be another one down the middle.
And then this becomes pedestrian only. So if you are riding a bicycle, you can still access these two trails via this trail, but not via this upper trail. So that would become pedestrian only. We also talked about, there was a trail alongside the road, which we got rid of. These continue to be multi-use down below the power line. And I actually think that based on the concept map, that this zone is a great area below the power line for sustainable trail development. And so partly we were thinking like, this was the recommendation. And so as much as we can keep trail development back here, we'll do. And yeah, I'm forgetting, Chip, do you remember if either of these we made pedestrian only?
Yeah. Let's see. Dana's climb is to be pedestrian only. Rocky View and Cascade are pedestrian only. Stream View, which is one access point for those two trails, will have both pedestrian and non-pedestrian traffic.
So stream use starts at just above the power lines at the end of Urbanic Way. That's the beginning. of stream view. Is that correct? Okay.
So just string you that piece there as well as crossing.
And this map has what you're missing the existing forest roads and the dash trails on some previous versions, right?
Yeah, so this has, these are the forest roads here.
Yeah.
And then the vast.
I was just wondering where it's written down, what you were just reading, Chase, or whoever, that what's currently envisioned for each trail.
In the trail stewardship plan, allowable activities.
Okay, so it's written down somewhere in the trail stewardship plan and associated with this map.
Early.
Okay.
Is this map in the, this map is not in the.
It has the hunting. dates
No,
and
we had to make this recently and that, we made it just to update folks on.
Yeah.
That, yeah, Brad.
One, I think one of the. Yeah, I think we may end up spinning our wheels. Or maybe why we've been spinning our wheels is that we're looking at a map that shows nothing except the lines of trails. So how can we evaluate that? With any sort of conclusiveness, if we don't know where the various sensitive areas are,
Yeah.
where the slopes are. And those maps, those are all on quote, the big compendium web page has got a ton of those.
Yeah.
So.
It's hard to know what, this is just like something that can be put out, but when we put this together, had all those maps in front of us. And it's still a work in progress, but you can't have it all on there, right?
A lot of those are the same things we've been, struggling over for over 2 years now.
Yeah.
We're still within, the buffers on a bunch of places. We've got, trails going through sensitive areas, the dry oak, the hemlock. Nothing about slope on there. I mean, that could be, I don't know, if the zoning regs hold, we're talking maybe thousands of dollars in engineering fees. And I think if we continue looking at just lines on a blank slate like that, I mean, that might as well be, gently rolling hills without a living creature in it. We're going to get in trouble when we have to apply, when we have to crank that stuff in.
Well, should we call that a sticky issue for next time?
Well, yeah.
And also, my goal in bringing this up was not to say, let's agree on it. It was just say, hey, just so we all know, this is where we left off in the summer.
I know.
And like, that's it. I just want to make sure that we were all on the same page and that.
And I asked, when I saw the map, because I was reading this and I couldn't, it's referencing names. And I needed help with, all right, where are these names?
Right.
Yeah.
So I asked, so that I could read this document, put names on a map so that when I'm reading the document,
Yeah.
I know where I am.
Yeah.
And this is
Sort
the
of.
first, this is the most complete map of the paths, trails, and existing roads that we have seen to date. It does not have all the information that you're talking about. It does not resolve the questions of exactly where and what potential impacts. It does have a few innovations, like a more complete picture that has them labeled as Wright is saying, and it has the innovation of pedestrian only, which was a response to some of the
Right.
commentary that we had before. So yeah, I mean, we need to probably start a meeting with this map instead of end one.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
We only ended it just to be like, just so we could see it.
Well,
I just have a really quick map question. The bottom of Hemlock Valley, is that meant to
No, it does connect.
come to Street View?
Yeah, yeah.
Street View?
It's
Okay,
big.
yeah.
I thought so. I
One of
thought
the-
so. I just wanted to make sure it was.
Yeah, this is from the Arrowwood
Okay.
database and they,
Take a little.
for some
green
reason,
Sharpie and-
that little piece was called
Yeah.
part of the trail that got
Yeah.
amended. So, yeah, it needs to be put in again somehow.
Where I think we get, beyond what I was saying before, there's also. We build public expectations when we put this up. People get excited about this, so they think, wow, we're gonna, be able to have, do Rocky View and it's gonna be a blast shooting around through there, whatever. And then we gotta give them the bad news. You can't do that because we've got a plan that says we gotta protect that area, or the slope is too steep. We don't wanna pay the engineers to figure out how to get around that. It's too far away to manage, whatever, all the different reasons, but when, Arrowwood and Sinuosity began with a map much like this, they never put the two things together, and it wasn't until Caitlin did in August, and a not very clear map, but previously, some of us who weren't on the committee, other members of the public, put those together just to show that, it's sort of an academic exercise if you start doing that without paying attention to what the constraints are on
Mhm.
putting trails down. So
Well, I think this is one of the hot spots that we got to organize.
Yeah.
A little more intentionally next time.
Yeah.
It's not academic, though. I do have to differ with you. But I mean, there was a lot of time spent walking around and looking and dodging and making micro changes to avoid some of the more sensitive areas. So this is not a final plan, and nobody should
Yeah.
get their hopes up that this is the way it's going to be.
Mhm.
It's also not an academic exercise that was written from a desk on a piece of paper without taking into account a number of elements that have been well explained.
But you can't see that on the map.
Well,
If-
yeah,
if-
you have to read the report, that's true. But we should not base our discussion next week solely on this map. We should have a lot of the elements that you're
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
about. I like a lot of the hotspot maps. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm gonna confuse the terminology here. The heat zone,
Heat zone.
areas that have the
buffer
sensitive
zones
wildlife and
of
the buffers.
influence,
Yeah. I mean, we need to look at multiple maps because it is complex,
Yeah.
but anyway, yeah, just so the public knows and for the record that we're not making any decisions about this map, right, Daniel?
No, we're not making any decision about this map. This is solely for our own information.
I know that.
So-
And it doesn't resolve a lot of the things that we need to talk about. It does innovate in some ways that previous maps have not, that integrate some of the public comments that we have received, like pedestrian only stuff.
And with that, we're up on time, so I'm gonna move to, well, actually, I can move the co-chair. Would someone, I think unless
How about,
Bob is just clapping his hands, so I like that. Just see if we have any other comments from the public, if anyone. And I'll take that as a no.
I have a.
Can I say something?
Oh, sure.
Can you hear me?
yes,
Lots of good progress. So keep up with it. The first task must be the management plan. Second task, the management plan. Third task, the management plan. Then the hotspots. I like the discussion that says this trail map that you just looked at is where we're at. I would put that totally aside until you get to the bigger picture. And then to go towards the beginning of the meeting, I have a very different view of what the select board thought and said with regard to what they needed. It is far greater, I believe, than was described. It does require some attention to a bunch of big league things, which include the modern literature discussion of hotspots and things like that. And then to go to the very end, at the beginning of the meeting, I think Dan pointed out that there are people out there who might be parts of your subcommittees. And I suggest that you try to incorporate some of them as volunteers, as has happened before. As just one example, I took a look at the RFP, having written dozens, and that's an underestimate, dozens of RFPs for everything from deans to chairs to faculty to managers to lab technicians to town managers. It needs a lot of work. And you have to start by saying, what is it you want this person to be doing? And then you can write the RFP accordingly. I'll stop there, but I've got a bunch of other ideas if at some point you want to listen to them. Thanks loads.
Thanks, Bob.
So we
Thanks,
got a
Bob.
volunteer.
Yeah,
yeah.
for someone who knows a lot of volunteers. Sam, did you have a comment?
I was just curious about the feasibility of, like, I have similar, I guess, frustrations that Brad does with the maps. Like, there's a lot of maps and I appreciate the maps that tell a lot of things, but it's really hard to try to take all those maps and lay them on one another. Because I mentioned before, like EPZs, like I want to enjoy the forest, even if they're like, aren't like the, official trails yet, like dispersed public access is like, allowed to a degree, but I'm not trying to mess with the areas that are supposed to be protected. Just for lack of knowing, like, what the rules are, I guess. But it's really hard to like look at the map and then try to figure out like, well, how close have I walked to the buffer zone? So like, I don't know, is that something that the town or even maybe the Conservation Commission, since they have potentially money, like, could we like hire somebody to put those maps together in a way that's like actually accurate, because I feel like you can draw a line as closely as you can to what you think is that's going to be the trail and where like the EPZs are and stuff, but you could be off, not know whether or not the trail is actually in the wildlife corridor or the vernal pool buffer zone or something. So like, I thought I would just share that that's something that has been really challenging for me to like look at and figure out like what is where, and have it be precise. So I don't know if that's something that the committee would be interested in exploring and seeing if, you know, somebody could put a map together that, I mean, interactive would be great if you could select and deselect stuff, but I don't know if we have the money or expertise to do that kind of thing. But even just like a bigger map too. Like a lot of the resources online are really grainy and small and like really hard to like zoom in on.
Yeah.
If you're looking at a blurry map, that just doesn't.
Well, I'll bounce that back to the laundry basket committee and maybe task that committee with identifying the need based on current documents. And so I think if we can identify the types of map and the level of expertise needed to do those, then we could identify how they would get done.
Okay, cool.
So that would be great to do.
Dan, as some of you know, some of you don't, I have done an extensive bit of work on all of the maps just described at all levels of accuracy and magnification. I'd be willing to help. I am a GIS person. I'm not an expert. By the way, the RFP should look for someone who is. But in the meanwhile, I'd be delighted to share with someone the maps that I've already made, and I can custom make them to show whatever you want.
Thanks, Bob. So I'm gonna put Bob in parentheses on that laundry basket group. And so if you all identify some maps that are missing, if Bob could make those first, that would be amazing, and we wouldn't have to. But there might be some more interactive map or something where we want to like actually hire someone to do.
There are interactive maps.
Yeah, there are
Gotta
some.
dig a little.
Okay.
But so the laundry basket committee should figure that out because, and they're at external websites and, but they do exist, many of them, maybe, yeah. And there's a bunch where you can layer on like
Okay.
this hotspot, that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'll have to revisit. I'm a few hundred pages deep
I know.
on a lot of the documents, but I haven't read them all.
I know.
That's part of the problem, is there's too much.
There's so.
Yes, exactly.
There's too much.
It goes back to the organizing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. I've been trying to do the same thing with the maps and I just throw up my hands. I'm like,
Yeah,
this
I
is
mean,
so
yeah.
frustrating.
I've just finished the, you know, like 382 page document, you know, it's like the original one, but it's like, there's so much more that I have to get. to.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's why I'm interested in helping organize it, just because it's a lot, you know, and I think people would like to educate themselves. Like, if there's anyone else there like me, which I'm sure there are plenty of people in Richmond that want to use the forest, like responsibly. It's really hard to do that right now, and you know, I know for certain that, you know, you're being responsible, but
Yeah.
Safely too. It's easy to get lost in 428 acres.
this is true. I don't have that problem anymore, but I did when I first started walking around in the forest.
So I want us to move along just in the interest of time. And I want to just thank you all for your good thoughts and comments and discussion. Appreciate it. And thank you all out there in public land for coming along and joining us on this wild ride. And do you have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, we will
Wait,
see
we have
you.
to identify ourselves because Cecilia's online.
Cecilia gave a thumbs up. That's good for me.
Okay.
Very well organized.
Yeah, thanks, Dan.
Yes.
Good job.
The next meeting will be on the 26th of February. So. We can talk, we can chat.
Okay.
And
Bye, y'all. Thank you.
we'll review the minutes of